Thanks for joining me as we take a strategic look at the tools of persuasion. You know, the best definition that I've ever heard of what's the difference between sales and marketing is marketing is consumed with generating leads. That's their purpose. The role of the sales organization is to take those leads and convert those to customers, from a lead to an opportunity to a customer. So we're going to focus on now what we can do as sales leaders to help your sales force convert those leads. Like tadpoles pass through phases before they become a frog, leads pass through phases before they become a customer. The phases that they pass through are trust, urgency, and selection. If leads don't pass through these phases, they don't become frogs. It's the job of the sales team to cultivate this metamorphosis. There's a natural order of things. First, the salesperson must cultivate the trust of the customer. And when we think about trust, most people just think about integrity, but it's much more than that. Integrity kind of falls into our definition of likability. We tend to like people that have a high level of character. And it's more than just an affinity. We tend to like people that are like us. So the job of the salesperson is to create that rapport, to talk about something they have common interest in. So they must find that common interest, and they must find it quick. The second part of trust is credibility. How believable is your sales force? Before we can continue into the cultivation, we have to know how the salesperson is going to create that rapport and establish that credibility. So when your salespeople first meet with a customer, the very first time or the first few interactions they have with that customer, what are they doing to create that rapport and establish that credibility? Well, if they're like most salespeople, what they do is they start talking about the company, your company, their company. And they start talking about how great the company is, how long it's been in business, and those type things. And then eventually they get into talking about the features and benefits of their solution. In essence, they're selling. And the problem with selling too soon is it breaks rapport, the very thing that we're trying to build. Think about it like this. When your salesperson is meeting a customer for the first time, this is representing the customer, and this is your salesperson, and they're on a seesaw, a teeter-totter, if you will. And the customer's fears are very high because they don't know the salesperson, they don't know him very well. And the credibility of your salesperson is very low. The whole purpose of these first few interactions is to raise the credibility of your salesperson, and in so doing, the apprehension of the customer falls in proportion, congruent with the credibility. Well, what tools are you giving your salespeople right now to help them do this? We've created a tool at Program on Persuasion. It's called Education-Based Briefings. And what we do, rather than trying to sell the customer too soon, we try to cultivate that relationship. And we do it with education. We provide your reps with a means to teach something very valuable to that customer. And that's something that's very valuable is what all customers are interested in. Themselves. Their industry. What's going on in their industry? So we build this market-based research that speaks to what other companies like them are doing. What are the biggest trends and what are the challenges going on? And when we do this, we've created rapport, because that's something we both have in common to talk about. And when it's done properly, it raises the credibility of your salesperson, which is exactly what we're trying to do when we're in this phase called trust, before we can move into urgency. Only when we cultivate trust can we move into the next phase of developing urgency. So staying with the frog theme, see if you've heard this folk tale before. There's 5 frogs that's sitting on a lily pad. 2 of them decide to jump off. How many frogs are left? 3, right? No. I said 2 decided to jump off. They didn't jump off. They just decided to jump off. All 5 are still sitting on the lily pad. And so it is with urgency so often with customers. They decided something, they told you the decision, but they didn't take action. This phase is all about getting the opportunity or the lead to take action. Most salespeople have been taught that we need to find out what the customer's needs are. And then if we solve that need, then they'll buy from us. Well, and there's some truth to that, but it has some holes in it. First, It assumes that all customers know what their own needs are, know what their own problems are, and they don't. Even if they did, it's not at a priority. It's not urgent enough for them to take action. If it was, they probably have already taken action. So the role of the salesperson when they're in this phase is to help the customer discover the need that they have. As a salesperson, just because we say it's so, don't make it so. The customer has to discover it for themselves. And we do that by asking great questions, a process, a series of questions. Think about it like this. Let me show you one more graph. And here's a graph, and all customers lay somewhere on this horizontal axis. From here of being satisfied all the way over to crisis mode. This is the current situation of the customer. And what I typically ask sales reps is, this vertical axis is how receptive the customer is to any solution. Not necessarily your solution, but to any solution, based on how satisfied they are with the current situation. And customers know this intuitively. When customers are very satisfied, they're not very receptive to hearing anybody's solution. So the magic in persuasion is, how do you move customers from satisfied to crisis? Because as we move them from left to right, from satisfied to crisis, from almost zero receptivity, it starts raising as they're neutral to unsatisfied to crisis mode. It goes through the roof. And the way that we do that, the way that we move customers, once we've earned their trust and we're in this urgency, is by asking a series of great questions that we've developed. We call it discovery. It helps customers discover their own problems, so they've discovered themselves, and then we start talking about and asking them questions along the lines that, what's the impact of not fixing the problem? What circumstances will arise? This is how you create urgency, and this is the tool that we give to your customers to help create that. So even when we help a customer discover what the problems are, the tendency of the salesperson, solve the problem. I heard a problem, solve the problem. Let me tell you the features and benefits of how I can solve that problem. And it's a big mistake because they're usually still too early in the axis to be receptive to what you're talking about. When we offer our solution too soon, which we've all done before, it looks like this. The customer starts poking holes in your solution. They start telling you why it won't work. That's because they haven't gotten over the bridge yet of being receptive to a solution. So rather than offering the solution, what do? We teach your guys how to ask impact questions to reveal the consequences of what happens if they don't fix the problem. This is where urgency is created with the customer, and it's powerful. This creates the urgency needed to take action. Once they decide to jump, which is created here in urgency, before they jump, they have to know where they're going to land. This is where selection comes into play. And the tool for selection is the presentation and how you develop the presentation. The good news is, if your salesperson is the one that developed the trust, moved the lead into urgency, now it's an opportunity, and now we're over here in the selection process, they've positioned themselves very favorably, but not so fast. Just because we got them there doesn't mean they're going to do business with us. This is the phase that we finally offer our solution, and the way that we present our solution is the key. Most presentations merely serve to convey data, not to persuade. And every presentation has to persuade. The proper sequence and the method is critical to create a no-brainer decision for the customer. For example, the presentation must contrast the solution from all other options. If you're not differentiating yourself, you're selling as much for your competition as you are your own company. In order to be persuasive, you must create a sharp contrast between your solution and all others. You must boldly claim your uniqueness. You see, as human beings, we're hardwired to instantly recognize contrast. Selling is about cultivating leads in the customers. We have three very powerful tools in which to do that, and how to move the customer through these three phases of trust, urgency, and selection. These three tools will provide the consistent, powerful leverage that your sales force needs in this cultivation process.